you're ready to start exploring Revit, this amazing tool for creating and documenting architectural projects. And it begins with opening a project. So I'm here in Revit and I'm looking at the recent files screen. This is what greets me when I first launch the software and I don't have anything open just yet. Now there's two areas of the recent files screen. We've got a projects area here at the top, and then beneath that we have a families area. So there's two basic kinds of files that we can open in Revit. A project file is your building file. It contains all of the geometry, all of the information and features that make up a building project. You can see some examples here in these little preview windows. So you can see you have the entire building sitting in that single project file. Now down here under families, the icons kind of give you a little hint of what they're for. Families are little individual parts and pieces that you populate your buildings with. So you can see I've got a simple little table there or a truss, and we could bring those parts together and assemble them into our larger building structures. Now, you can use both areas to either create or open existing files. So there's an open link and a new link in both locations. And in this movie, we're going to open up a project and we're going to take a look around so we can see what Revit has to offer. Now, one choice is to click this open link here, which would open up a browse window, or you can go up here to the application menu, this big R as folks refer to it. And when you click that, it opens up a file menu. Move your mouse down, but don't click yet. If we hover over the open command, it will highlight and it will give us choices on the right. And it's the same basic choices. We can open a project or a family. So either way, whether I use the open link back in recent files or whether I do it this way here, I'm going to get this browse window that's going to let me open up a file. So I'm just going to go to my exercise files folder. And in the chapter 1, I have this file here called restaurant. Now I'm going to just simply select that. Now, if you have file extensions turned on in Windows, you'll see that Revit files actually have this RVT extension, and you can see that confirmed down here under Files of Type. Revit is looking for an RVT file. So I'll simply click Open, and that will load this file up into Revit. Now, when the project first opens, it presents me the last open view that was saved with this project. In this case, it's a level 1 floor plan view. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, all of the things you would traditionally think of as drawings in a traditional set of architectural documents, floor plans, elevations, sections, 3D views, these are going to be views in a Revit project. So if we look over here on the left-hand side, there's this palette here called Project Browser. And right at the top of Project Browser is this item called Views, and in parentheses it says All. That just means it's showing me all the views. It's not filtered. And you can see that beneath that, there's categories. We've got structural plans and floor plans and ceiling plans and so on. Right here, you can see that level 1 is bold, and that's my level 1 floor plan view. That's the view that I'm looking at currently. So let's look at some of the other views that are available in here. I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and I've got ceiling plans, and I've got 3D views. Now, 3D views are really interesting because, of course, they give me a three-dimensional look at the entire building. Now, I've got a couple to choose from here. 3D view 1 is a nice perspective view standing at the street level, and this one that says just 3D with little curly brackets around it, that's an axonometric. I'm going to open up 3D view 1 by double-clicking on it. And you can see it's as if we're standing at the street view and we're looking up here at the corner of the building. Now, let's continue down a little bit. Let's say that you wanted to see an elevation of this wall right here. Well, that's going to be the east elevation. So you can see here under elevations, if I just double click east, now I'm looking straight on at that elevation view. Now, the views are not limited to just floor plans, elevations, and 3D views. We also have schedule views in Revit. Now, schedules, as you might be aware, are just lists of items that are in your project, like maybe a list of doors or a list of windows, and it's normally this laborious process of laying them out one line at a time and typing in all that information. In Revit, a schedule is actually just another live view of the model. And so what do I mean by that? Well, here you can see I've got a door schedule, a room schedule, and a window schedule. Well, we're looking at several windows right here. So let's go ahead and double click this window schedule and open that up. And what you're going to see is not only that collection of windows that we were looking at, but actually all of the windows that are in this building are listed here in this list automatically. To really kind of get a handle on how powerful that is, what I'd like to do is take all these windows that I have open right now and tile them together on the screen. If you've used any kind of modern piece of software, maybe Microsoft Office or what have you, you've seen a ribbon interface. So you've seen that most software these days has these ribbon tabs across the top, and when you click on them, there's a series of icons. What I want to do is click this View tab right here, and that changes the list of icons that are available here. And way over on the right-hand side, there's this button called Tile Windows, and I want to click that. Now, when I do that, I'll take the 4 windows that I currently have open, and it will just tile them on screen so I can see them all at the same time. Now, I want to adjust what I'm seeing, so I'm going to click in the 3D view window here. It doesn't really matter which one I click in. And if you look over at the right-hand side of this window, there's a little ghosted out toolbar, and as I move closer to it, it will light up. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to click this small little drop down here, and the command I'm looking for is Zoom All to Fit. Now, if it's already got a checkbox next to it, all I need to do is click this little icon, and that will run that command, and it does exactly as its name implies. It zooms all of the view windows to fit their frames. So now we can see all of them simultaneously. Now, let's take a look at just how powerful this building model that we're looking at is here in Revit. We are seeing a virtual model of our building. We're seeing it in 3D, in elevation, and in plan. We're even seeing it here in a tabular format in a schedule. Now watch what happens if I just click in the schedule item here, this first line item, and notice what happened in the other 3 views. Over here, this window lights up in blue in all 3 locations. That's a little tough to see in the plan view, but you can see it a little more clearly in the 3D in the elevation. As I click through different items here in the schedule, you'll see them light up accordingly in the various views. That item that I have selected is that window. So if I were to do something dramatic with that window selected, like for example, if I came up here to this rows panel and clicked delete, Revit will warn me that I'm actually deleting the object from the model. And if I'm undeterred by this warning and I click OK, watch what happens in the 2 graphical views. Notice that that window is no longer there. Okay, so that kind of proves to you or shows you that these are live views of the model. If I were to select one of the windows here in the elevation, I can change the kind of window that it is interactively on the fly. So I've got it selected. And then over here, I've got a palette called Properties. Now, at the very top of this palette, it says that that's a fixed window that's 36 inches by 72 inches. I'm going to open up that drop-down list, and I'm going to choose a really small size, so it'll be really obvious what just happened. So I'm going to choose the very first one on the list here, 16 by 24. Notice that the window becomes tiny here in the elevation, but notice also in the schedule that the size immediately changes. These 2 things cannot get out of sync because they're not separate drawings. They're just part of the same overall building model. So when you open a project in Revit, it's as if you're stepping into the actual building. And just like in real life, if you went over and picked up a chair and moved it, or you brought in a new piece of equipment, it would be there everywhere for everyone to see. The same is true in a Revit project. So as we explore Revit further throughout this course, keep that in mind, that that's one of the most powerful benefits of using the Revit software package. In this movie, I want to talk briefly about what we do when we have a multiple user team. In Revit, your entire project lives in a single project file. This raises a problem when you have more than one person on a team because only one person can access the project file at a given time. So this would not make it very practical for teams to work together. So what Revit offers is a feature called work sharing. With work sharing, you have a central file, and this file is typically stored on a network server. It can be any network server, any map drive will do the job. And then each user on the project team creates what we call a local version or a local copy of this file that they actually do their day-to-day work in. The local copy is created literally on the local hard drive, and it maintains a connection back to the central file. And what happens is every so often, the users on the team will synchronize with the central file. That'll take their changes and publish them to the central file, and any changes made by their colleagues, and bring them down and update their local copy. In so doing, everybody is able to work together on a project team and all make changes to various parts of the project. Now, I should also mention that if you're using Revit LT, the work sharing feature is not available in Revit LT. So Revit LT was designed for single person offices, where 1 or 2 people work there and they're working on their own standalone projects. So if you're working with Revit LT, then you're basically going to follow the steps that we did in the previous movie to open a project. Now, the challenge that we have is in a video course such as this, it's a little difficult for me to demonstrate and certainly to provide a exercise file for you to work in on this. So what I'm going to do is simply demonstrate the process that you follow to open and create a local copy. But I definitely recommend that you talk to your IT professionals or your BIM or CAD manager and get the details of how things are done in your firm. Think of this as really just an overview of the concept and a tool to help you get started. So what I've done is set up sort of a simulated network here on my system, and I've created a file called WorkShare. I'm going to show you how you would access that if it's a work sharing file. So I would use my open link, or I could go to my application menu to get there and go to my network server. In this case, it's on my D drive. And I've just created a file called your office network to simulate this location. When I open that file and I select the central file, in this case, it's a file called WorkShare. The most important setting is down here at the bottom of the screen. There's this Create New Local checkbox. And we want to absolutely make sure that that's checked. Now, it's checked by default, so you shouldn't have to do anything here. It should already be that way. But you want to just double check before you click open that that's checked. And what that will do is instead of opening the central file, which we don't want to do, that would be considered a bad thing, we want to make sure we're creating a local copy. Let me show you what that looks like. If I restore this down here, here's the file called WorkShare. And notice that at the end of that file, it's added my username, Paul Aubin, to the end of the name. So I'm now working on a local copy of this WorkShare enabled project. I could go about my work, make whatever changes I want to make, and then when I'm ready, I would go to the Collaborate tab or the Quick Access toolbar and use my Synchronize with Central command. And you can see it located right here and right here. This would maintain the location back to the central file. It knows where that file lives. And when I click OK, it would update any changes that I've made to the central file. And if any of my colleagues had made changes, it would pull those changes down and update my local copy as well. That's the way most teams are working together using a Revit environment. Now, for the remainder of the course, we're going to work in standalone projects. I definitely recommend you talk to some of your colleagues and your CAD and BIM manager and make sure that you've got the process down for what you do there at your firm. But that's the basic steps that are involved in opening and creating a new local file. When you first open a program like Revit, it can be a little bit daunting when you see all the buttons and controls and other settings floating around the screen. So in this movie, I'd like to just give you a quick tour. This is like the 5-minute tour that you get when you go to a friend's house, and I show you kind of where the living room is and the bathroom and the other things around the house so you can find your way around and feel a little more comfortable. Let's take our quick tour of Revit here. And we'll start in the upper corner here with the application menu. Often people refer to this affectionately as the big R. So the big R is basically a file menu. You've got new commands, open commands, save, save as, print, commands like that. Anytime you want to do any file in or file out, think big R. Next to that is the quick access toolbar. So we've got new and save and undo redo up there, but we also have some of the most commonly used commands, things like measure and dimensions and text and so on. Beneath that, we have the ribbon. It's organized into tabs. We have architecture tab, an insert tab, an annotate tab. Your tabs might vary slightly depending on the actual flavor of Revit that you have. But what they all have in common is that each tab just includes a collection of buttons. Usually those buttons are grouped into a panel. So for example, here in the architecture tab, we got a build panel, which includes the most common building tools, and then a circulation panel and so on. And then you have your individual buttons on those panels. And so this is very common in most software like Office or other programs where all the commands are listed on the ribbon. Beneath the ribbon is this little gray bar, which is currently empty. So I'm going to click the wall tool to show you what that might look like. If I were drawing a wall, you'll see the option bar lights up with a bunch of options specifically for this command. You want to keep your eye on the options bar as you're working because it will change frequently. Each time you run a different command, you'll get a different set of options. If I cancel out of this command by pressing my escape key and I click the door tool instead, you'll see that I get slightly different options. So I'll escape out of there. On the left-hand side of the screen, I have two palettes. I have the Properties palette and the Project Browser. Now, these are the default locations for these palettes, but you can move them around. So if you don't see them in this location on your screen, they're probably on your screen somewhere. If you don't see them anywhere on your screen, go to the View tab. Way over here on the right-hand side, you'll find a User Interface drop-down, and when you click on it, Project Browser and Properties should both have a check mark in them. If they don't, You can check them and they'll come back again, and you can move them wherever you'd like them to be. I'm going to leave them in the default positions as you see over here on the left. The properties palette is just that. It's a palette that we use to access the properties of objects that we have selected on screen or objects that we're creating. And the project browser is a place where we see all of the views in our project organized, our plans, our sections, our elevations, and you just simply double click on a view when you want to open it up and work in that view. And we briefly looked at the project browser in a previous movie. Now, at the very bottom of the screen is a status bar, and the thing you want to be looking for there is little messages from Revit. So you can see right now the current message says click to select and tab for alternates. So it gives you helpful information as you're working. So as your mouse changes position on screen, the message might change. So you can see that as I highlight different elements on the screen, I'm not clicking, I'm just moving my mouse over them and then highlighting, I'm getting different messages. So it's just a feedback mechanism that Revit uses. Over here on the right-hand side of the view window is a small little toolbar that is grayed out if your mouse is far away from it. But as your mouse gets closer to it, it brightens up and becomes more bold. Now, it includes navigation tools. And so what I'd like to do right now is show you how we can navigate on screen. So I'm in a floor plan, and it's kind of far away, and I'd like to zoom in a little bit closer. There are several ways that you can do that using the drop-down menu right here on this toolbar. The default is to zoom in a region, but you can see there's several other options here. So I'm going to click right on that icon, zoom in a region, and that will give you a little magnifying glass. And all I have to do is click and drag a rectangle, and it will zoom in on that rectangle. And so I can get a better look at what I'm seeing. If I click it again, I can zoom in even closer. And let's say I want to back up one step. Well, then I would just change tools. I would go to this drop down and say previous pan and zoom. If I do it a second time, it would keep going back again. Now let's zoom in maybe on this location here. And then I decide I want to see the entire screen again. Well, if I open that up, that is the zoom to fit command. We have other options here like zoom out 2 times, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. And we even have a really interesting one here called zoom to sheet size, which basically looks at this scale down here at the bottom of the window, 1/8 inch equals a foot in this case, and it zooms the screen to match that scale. If I take a look at roughly how big everything is here on screen, and if I were to change the scale and then click this command again, you'll see that it zooms in much closer if it was 1/4 inch, and if it was 1/16 of an inch, it zooms out a little bit further. Notice that the scale that you have the drawing set to, I'm going to go back to 1/8 inch, will have a big impact on the way this zoom to sheet size command will work. And that just gives you a rough idea of what it will look like when you print the drawing out. Now, the final way that you can zoom and pan is probably the easiest way and the most user-friendly way, and that's to use the wheel on your mouse. If you roll the wheel down, Revit zooms out. If you roll it up, it zooms in. It zooms in or out around the point where your cursor is located. So if I move my cursor closer to this column and zoom out, it stays centered on that column. If I move it next to this table, it zooms in on that table. You don't have to click anything. Just move your mouse there and zoom in or out, and it will focus on that location. If you hold the wheel in and drag, you keep the magnification constant and you just pan the screen. So you can pan by dragging, you can zoom by rolling. And so those are some ways that you can navigate around the screen. And there's your quick overview of the Revit interface. And so hopefully those two will help you feel a little bit more acclimated, a little more comfortable in working in the Revit environment. Knowing how to open existing projects is important, but knowing how to create your own project is equally important. So in this movie, I'd like to look at the ways that we can create a new Revit project. So I'm looking at the recent file screen, which will greet me when I first launch Revit. And up here in the projects location, we have an open link, which we used in the previous few movies. And right beneath that, we have a new link. Now, beneath that, we also have several predefined items. There's a construction template, architectural template, structural, and so on. It's possible for you to create a new project from scratch, but that's typically not the recommended approach. What you typically want to do is start a new project from a template. Now, a template file in Revit is pretty similar to a template file in really any piece of software. It's essentially a starting point. That template file contains within it all of the settings and configuration that you would typically want to have at the beginning of any new project. The goal in creating a good template is to think about all of those settings and all of those features you would want any new project to have. And then you can save that as a template. And Revit ships with some basic templates to get us started. So if you wanted to, you could just simply click one of these links and start with one of those templates. So if your discipline is architectural, you could click this architectural template, and it will start you with a basic starting point that's suitable for a pretty simple architectural project. Now, let me just take a quick look around and show you what you get when you start with this architectural template. Over here on the project browser, under views, you'll see that we've got a few floor plans, a couple ceiling plans, and 4 basic building elevations. So those elevations are actually these little symbols right here on screen. So we've got a north, south, east, and west. Now, this is a really basic template, and it only has a few settings within it. Some other things that you would find in this template is some standard content. So I'm going to click this component button here on the ribbon, and then open up the list here, and you can see that the content that's included in this basic architectural template is a desk, a parking space, and a tree. Not a whole lot by any stretch. There's a couple support items down here at the bottom. But, some really basic simple items to get you started. I'm going to click the modify tool here to cancel. Let's contrast this with one of the other templates that are also available. So I'm going to go to the big R menu here, highlight new, and then slide over here to project. I'm going to click on project, and that's going to open up the new project dialog. I'll get the same list of built-in templates. There's the construction template, the structural, the mechanical, and there's also this browse button right here. So I'm going to click on browse, and all of the templates that are installed with my system will be listed here in this folder. The one that I want to choose here is the commercial default. If you're using Revit LT, the name is slightly different, but the template is essentially the same. So I'm going to click open here to open that commercial default, and then OK. And if you look at the project browser this time, you're going to see that there's a few more views here under floor plans. We still have the same 4 elevation views. If we scroll down a little further, we've got some schedules, door schedule, window schedule, and so on. And we've got some sheets. Now, a sheet is just simply a title block that has on it the viewport that looks into one of those views up above. So this is a viewport of our reflected ceiling plan, which is this view right here. That's what you see in this viewport right there. So these sheets are already set up. So you can imagine that if your company had a standard title block, that standard title block could already be loaded here in this template, so that when you start a new project, you automatically get the standard title block and all the other settings. Now let's just go back to the level 1 floor plan here. Let's click that component button again. And you'll notice here that we've got a few more items this time than we had in the standard architectural template. There's a light fixture here. There's a toilet fixture here. So there's a couple more things. You may prefer to start with one of these templates instead of that standard architectural one, but the choice is really up to you. I'm going to click the modify tool to cancel. For the project that we're going to build in the next chapter, I'm going to start here with this commercial template, just because it has a few more of those items in it. So what I'm going to do is go to my big R, go to save. Because I've never named this project, it's going to ask me for a name. I'll put it on my desktop and give it a name. So when you want to create a new project in Revit, it's as simple as choosing an appropriate template to base your project on. Once you've got that template opened up, you can save it, give it a name, and then proceed to start adding your building geometry. So in the next chapter, we'll begin adding geometry to this project and building our building model.